Okay, so now let's talk about the trig functions on the unit circle. Okay, so unit circle here means radius is 1. So if you look at any point, so this point x comma y on the unit circle, right, on the unit circle. So the distance from this point to the center 0, 0 is 1. That's the definition of radius. So you use the distance formula, you will get distance is square root of x squared plus y squared. So x squared plus y squared is 1 squared. That's one way to get this. The other way is the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so if you look at a right triangle, so you can draw a right triangle like this. Okay, so what's the height of this triangle? Y. What's the bottom side of the triangle? X. So if you use the Pythagorean theorem, you get x squared plus y squared is 1 squared. Okay, so there's two ways to get this relation between the point xy and the radius 1. Okay, radius 1, because this is the unit circle. So now 1 squared, you simplify a little bit, you got x squared plus y squared is number 1. Okay, so this is true for any point xy on the unit circle. Okay, so now let's draw the right triangle, right? Let's draw the right triangle. So suppose this is the unit circle for any point here, x comma y. So let's draw a right triangle. Terminal side passes point P, and then the right triangle for the angle T. Okay, so the book is T for this chapter, so we will use the angle T. So angle is T, radius R is 1, because this is a unit circle. Okay, so what's the definition of sine T? Sine T is opposite over hypotenuse. So this will be opposite side is y, bottom side is x. So it's y over 1, which is y. And what's cosine T? Cosine T is adjacent side over hypotenuse. So this is x over 1 is x. Okay, so now we got the relation between trig values and xy. So sine t is y and the cosine t is x. So another way we can write down the point P on the unit circle, it will be x comma y. So the point P is cosine t comma sine t. So that's a very important property for the unit circle. So let's start again. Any point on the unit circle, any point. So maybe the point P is here, right? So here is the angle T. The relation we just got. So what is this point P? Point P will be cosine of the angle T, comma sine of the angle T. Okay, so trig values are the x and y coordinate for the unit circle. Okay, so radius has to be 1. Okay, radius has to be 1. So from this relation, we can easily get the sum identities. Okay, so this is the relation between sine and cosine. Sine t plus 2 pi is equal to sine t. Cosine t plus 2 pi is equal to cosine t. So now let's prove it on the unit circle, right? On the unit circle. So what is sine t comma cosine t? Okay, so now we know sine t comma cosine t is a point P on the unit circle. So it's cosine t comma sine t if the angle is t. Okay, so here radius is 1. Okay, radius is 1. So now let's look at what's this point. Okay, so let's look at a new point. P star is cosine t plus 2 pi and comma sine t plus 2 pi. So this point P star will be on the unit circle with the angle t plus 2 pi. So now let's draw t plus 2 pi. So let's change the color. So this is t. T plus 2 pi will be this green angle. Okay, so P star is on the unit circle. So this is on the unit circle. And the angle is t plus 2 pi. So t and t plus 2 pi has the same terminal side. So P and the P star are the same point. So we know P is equal to P star. Okay, they are both on the unit circle. One is angle t, the other is angle t plus 2 pi. T and t plus 2 pi have the same terminal side. So P is equal to P star. So P is equal to P star, same point. That's why we got cosine t is equal to cosine t plus 2 pi. Sine t is equal to sine t plus 2 pi. Okay, so unit circle is very important. We got this relation. Okay, we got this relation. So this is the definition of periodic function. Okay, periodic function. So a function is periodic if we have this property. Okay, if we have this property. So this P is called the period of f. Okay, the positive number P is the period of f. So what we got before, we got sine t plus 2 pi is equal to sine t. Cosine t plus 2 pi is equal to cosine t. Okay, so the angle is changing, but 2 pi is not. 2 pi is a fixed number. Okay, 2 pi is a fixed number. So let's compare this definition of periodic function. Okay, periodic function. So here is the input t for the function. So input t for the function. So this number is the period p. Okay, period for the sine function is 2 pi. Similarly, period for the cosine function is also 2 pi. Okay, is also 2 pi. So they are both periodic function. Okay, so now we will use the unit circle and this periodic function property to draw the graph of sine and cosine. So let's first look at the graph of sine t. Okay, the graph of sine t. So let's pick some numbers for the angle t, right? Angle t. So angle could be 0 degree, 90 degree, 180 degree, 270, and then 360. Okay, so let's find sine t. Okay, so let's find sine t. So basically we can find sine t and cosine t together. Okay, sine t and cosine t together. And I just said we need unit circle, right? Unit circle. So any point on the unit circle we have is cosine t comma sine t, right? Sine t. So now let's draw the unit circle. Okay, so any point here is cosine t comma sine t. So now we want to find sine t. So the y part, the y coordinate of the point will be sine t. So to find the output sine t for a particular angle, we just need to find the y coordinate for this corresponding point. Okay, corresponding point. So first point, angle 0. So this is angle 0. Okay, angle 0. So this point P is cosine 0 degree comma sine 0 degree. right? So what is this point P? This point P is 1, right? Is 1. So this is 1, 0. So now you can see cosine of 0 degree is 1 and the sine 0 degree is 0. Okay, so this point, because this radius 1, so actually this point is 1, 0. So cosine 0 is 1, sine 0 is 0. So we got sine 0 is 0. Okay, so now let's look at 90 degree. Okay, 90 degree. So 90 degree, this will be our point P, right? The rotation will be 90. The angle is 90. So what is this point? This point, we have two ways to write it down. If we use sine and cosine, so this will be cosine 90, comma, sine 90. Okay, so if we use number line, xy axis, so this point is 0, comma 1. So what is sine 90? Sine 90 is number 1. Okay, so you can see the sine value is just the y part of the point. So now when we have 180, so 180 is this point. So this point is negative 1, comma 0. So what is sine of 180? Is the y part of that point. So this is 0. 270 is down here. So this point is 0, negative 1. So what's sine of 270 is the y coordinate of that point. 0, negative 1. So it's negative 1. And finally, we'll go back to the initial side, x positive x-axis. So this is 0.10, so the y part is 0, so sine 360 is 0. Okay, so 60. So that's our 5 points for the sine curve. Okay, 5 points for the sine curve. Okay, so now let's write down these 5 points, right? Let's write down these 5 points. So x, comma y for this function, okay, for this function. So the input, the output, okay, the output. So this will be 0, 0, right? So degrees are not numbers, okay? So now we want to draw the picture. We have to change degrees to reading measure, okay? Pi over 2, that's a irrational number. That they are numbers. And then 180 is pi. This is 3 pi over 2. And this is 2 pi, okay? And then we have pi over 2, comma 1. The next point is pi 0. The next point is 3 pi over 2, negative 1. And then the last point is 2 pi 0. Okay, so plot these 5 points. We can draw the graph of sine t. Okay, so the first point, 0, 0. Let's assume here is 2 pi. The midpoint is pi, so this is pi over 2. This is 3 pi over 2. Okay, 3 pi over 2. So when x is 2 pi, we have 1. So this is 2 pi and 1. 2 pi, comma 1. When x is pi, it's 0, so this is the point, the third point. The next point is 3 pi over 2, negative 1. So it's down here, so let me change the color. It's down here. And then the last point is 2 pi 0. So the last point is on the x-axis. Okay, so connecting these 5 points, this is the curve we got for sine t. Okay, for sine t. So now we do the same thing for cosine t. Okay, for cosine t, t is the angle. Okay, t is the angle. So we need the unit circle again. So any point here is cosine t sine t. So where's cosine? Cosine will be the x part for any point on the unit circle. Okay, so here radius is 1. Okay, radius is 1. So now when we have angle 0, so this is angle 0, we have the first point 1, 0. So x part is 1, so cosine 0 is 1. So 1 is pi over 2, 90 degree. When the angle is 90 or pi over 2, so we got this point is 0, 1. So the x part is cosine of the angle. So this is the angle t, right? 90 degree. X part is cosine pi over 2. So it's 0. So when the angle is pi over 2, we got cosine pi over 2 is 0. And then pi. Okay, so when the angle is pi, the point is -1, 0. So x part is -1, so we got cosine pi is -1. And here's 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2 is 0, -1. So x part is 0 again. Okay, so we are talking about the angle. Okay, the angle is 3 pi over 2. So the x part of the point on unit circle is cosine. And then the last one is 2 pi. 2 pi, we go back here, the beginning. So cosine 2 pi is 1. Okay, so these are the cosine values. So what are the 5 points? So this is 0, 1. Okay, so x and y coordinate for the graph, right? Input 0, output 1. Input pi over 2, output 0. And then this is pi -1. And then 3 pi over 2, 0. And then 2 pi 1. Okay, 2 pi 1. So now let's draw the graph of cosine. The graph of cosine function, right? Cosine function. So this is x comma y, right? X comma y. So the angle is from 0 to 2 pi, and then the midpoint pi. So this is pi over 2, and this 3 pi over 2 between pi and 2 pi. Okay. Yeah, so now let's look at height. When the x input is 0, output is 1. So here is 1. 0, 1. The first point. Pi over 2 comma 0, so it's down here on the x-axis. Pi -1, so it's go to the lower half plane. So here is pi -1, and this 3 pi over 2 comma 0, and then let's go back to 2 pi, let's go back to height 1. Okay, height 1. So now let's connect them. This is the curve we got. This is the graph of cosine function between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, so now let's put these two graphs together. Okay, only two graphs together. Sine t and cosine t. Okay, and cosine t. So what is sine t? Sine t from 0 to 2 pi. So start from 0, go up to 1, go back to 0, go to -1, go back to 0. So this is the sine curve. Okay, sine curve. So what is cosine curve? Cosine curve is different. So the beginning point, the starting point is 1. It's not 0. Okay, the height is 1. So from 0 to 2 pi cosine curve. Okay, cosine curve. So cosine curve from 1 down to 0, and then go down, continue to -1, and then turn back. turn back to 0, and then go back to 1. So this is the cosine curve. Okay, this is the cosine curve. And we already know they are periodic function, right? They are periodic function. So we know cosine sine t is equal to sine t plus 2 pi. And cosine t is equal to cosine t plus 2 pi. So on the graph, this means after 2 pi, it will repeat the picture between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, so here is 2 pi from 2 pi to 4 pi. So let's assume, so let's make it longer, right? Let's make it longer. So let's assume here is 4 pi. So what's the graph between 2 pi and 4 pi for sine curve? It's exactly the graph from 0 to 2 pi. Okay, it's exactly the same. So let's continue. I will use different color. Okay, I will use different color. So the green one from 0 go up to 1, go back to 0, go down to -1, go back to 0. Okay, so these two curves are exactly the same. Okay, exactly the same. So you can also go to the other direction, right? This is 0, so 0 between 0 and -2 pi. Okay, -2 pi. So what's the picture looks like? Okay, what's the picture looks like? It's almost the same as the middle one, the beginning picture. Okay, beginning picture. And then we can continue to change it, right? So let's change the color again. So next one is the same, and then this side is also the same. Okay, it's the same. So it's a repeating curve. Okay, it's a repeating curve, and then the period is 2 pi. So this is the period 2 pi. P is 2 pi for sine curve. Okay, for sine curve. So cosine curve is very similar. Okay, it's very similar. So now if we look at the cosine curve between 2 pi and 4 pi. Okay, so it will be exactly the same as the curve between 0 and pi. 0 and 2 pi. So start from 1, go down to -1, and then turn back at 4 pi. So next one is another cosine curve, right? So from here, from 1, go down, and then go back to 1. So the negative side, okay, the negative side. So this is -2 pi. So what's the curve? From 1, go down to -1, go back to 1. Right? And then from -2 pi to -4 pi. So this is -4 pi. It's the same curve again. Okay, it's the same curve again. So sine and cosine, the most important thing is just beginning. Okay, just beginning. What's the curve between 2 pi, 0 and 2 pi? That's the curve. Okay, just keep repeating. Okay, just keep repeating.